This week on Buffering, we're going to be following up on a Gen Z topic we started a couple weeks ago and also talking a little bit about AI. And Gabe, on that AI note, about 12 months ago, we had WWDC with Apple introducing Apple Intelligence. And at the time, everyone was excited. Everyone was ready to see what Apple is going to do with AI. Again, one of the biggest tech companies. And here we are 12 months later. We just had WWDC 25. AI has been absolutely revolutionary over the past 12 months. And Apple Intelligence hasn't been part of that.
No, I saw a great tweet that basically said some version of that, Zach, which was, over the last 12 months, AI has changed the world and Apple Intelligence has had literally nothing to do with it. And I feel like that's very accurate. And I was thinking back to that episode, Zach, as well, where we were talking about how Apple Intelligence would increase the upgrade cycle for hardware. And I do not have a phone that has the ability to have Apple Intelligence on it. And I was sort of suspecting that was going to be a big motivating factor for me wanting to upgrade my phone so I could get Apple Intelligence. Spoiler alert, I still have no Apple Intelligence on my phone because I haven't upgraded my device. And I think the reality is that it's been a pretty massive failure across the board, both from a software perspective and from a hardware perspective.
Well, it's funny, Gabe, because my favorite, and I think I've said this on a podcast in the past, if not, Gabe, a one-on-one chat with you, it's hard to differentiate between the two now. But my favorite Apple Intelligence feature is summarizing notifications. And sometimes, Gabe, it does such a bad job at that. I'll even send you the AI summary from Apple. And it's just comical. I still feel bad for the guy who got broken up with and had Apple Intelligence summarize the message. But
that was one of the funniest things I've seen in the last year. It was the AI summary of a breakup text, which was basically, "We're no longer in a relationship. She wants her stuff back from your apartment," which just made me laugh so hard. At least the guy had a good sense of humor about it.
I mean, how could you not in that situation? But no, we just had WWDC here last week. There really wasn't any big breakthroughs. But the reason I bring this up is, again, we did our Apple Intelligence episode about a year ago, and even though Apple Intelligence wasn't a kind of a featured point of WWDC this year, Dub as it's also called, I feel like it's still the most talked about thing from Dub. I won't say that anymore.
That does feel like a really weird way to say it. Yeah, it was definitely the focus, but I wonder if it's so much the focus because there was so much hype around it last year and we're 12 months later and there really aren't any good use cases for Apple Intelligence, or very, very few, which is ironic because there's been so much progression on so many other AI tools. It's just such a frankly, a colossal failure on their part. I can't believe how badly this whole thing has gone.
I'm an optimist, so I have high hopes for the future, but until that date comes, I'm going to continue using their competitors' products. But Apple Intelligence aside, WWDC aside as well, Gabe, a couple weeks ago, we talked about Gen Z in the workforce. And I made a comment on that episode how we want to follow up with more of Gen Z as a consumer. And we've kind of talked about Gen Z in the past, and we've always said, like, hey, these are people who are going to be buying your products and services soon. Like, get ready. It's coming. Well, that ship has sailed. It is time. Gen Z is buying your products and services. Soon the next generation will be as well, which I don't know what the date on that is, but that's just going to make everyone feel old at that point. But
even you, my friend.
Oh gosh, it's the chrome hair coming in again now. But who is Gen Z? Let's talk a little bit about this, because this is really going to kind of lead us into the whole episode today. But you've got Gen Z here, 1997 to 2012. This demographic here. But this is one of your largest generations to date, and they're on track to be the wealthiest generation ever. And with that, the fastest growth in spending power. So there's going to be a lot of money on the table here.
Yeah.
And what you also have is a digital first generation. Gabe, I feel like we joke about this all the time. I largely don't know life without, a smartphone or, this immediate access to information. This next generation is not going to know life without immediate access to AI, things like this. But there was one statistic I found when I was doing some research for this podcast episode, and I put it in here because it's such a silly statistic to include, but it said 98% of Gen Z uses the internet regularly. And I thought that was just funny to begin with, because I mean, why not just say everyone? But for the 2% who does not use the internet regularly in the Gen Z population, they probably won't be listening to this episode, but I just thought that was a funny statistic. 98% of Gen Z using the internet regularly.
Yeah, I saw that too, and it cracked me up. It's ubiquitous, right? Technology adoption is ubiquitous in this generation, and I think the point you brought up there is so spot on, which is Gen Z does not remember life without immediate access to information through technology. So they're leveraging that technology to have immediate access to all of the information that the internet has provided to them. So that to me is the really key takeaway here is, again, like you said, basically everybody. There's the 2% holdout that are somehow, I don't know, would they be using a flip phone, or do they just like reject technology entirely? I don't know. But regardless, it's a massive group of people that are using technology all the time.
And just going back to a comment I made too about, Gen Z's buying your products and service today. If you want to capture that Gen Z revenue tomorrow, Gabe, you've got to invest today. So that's kind of what we'll be talking about today. We've got some statistics to share with you, some quick facts. And then we also want to talk a little bit about what Gen Z is buying, how they're buying, why they're buying, and kind of what builds that loyalty with Gen Z, because it's very different than your boomer population, your millennial population, your Gen X population. So I think we've got a great episode here today, Gabe. Should we dive right into it?
Yeah, let's do it, man.
Man, well, let's talk a little bit about those statistics that I just love to share. But Gen Z is on track to overtake boomer spending by 2029. Like I said, a lot of money on the table. But by the end of this year, Gen Z online shoppers will outnumber those in the Gen X demographic as well. So this online shopping trend, it's not going anywhere. They're here to buy things, but where are they buying stuff? 60% choose to support a small business. And I think this is very impactful, Gabe, especially with the customers we work with. We work with a lot of smaller BSPs, and this compares to, 42% of Gen X and 20% of boomers have that buy local preference. But again, Gen Z, 60% want to support that local business.
Yeah, that's an awesome statistic for, like you said, most of the customers that we work with. Most of the folks that we're working with are smaller organizations that are local in the communities that they serve. And it's a great opportunity to continue to lean into that heavily as a differentiator with that younger generation. I was a bit surprised by that statistic, to be honest with you, Zach. I was surprised at how much of a preference, especially in comparison to other generation groups, how much of that preference there was for local and small.
That was an interesting one. And I think the next one too is something I think I really want to talk about, especially with some of our previous episodes here. But 81% of Gen Z conducts online research prior to buying something. 85% read the reviews prior to making that purchase decision. And last week, we chatted with Gina from Home Telecom. So if you haven't listened to that episode, definitely go give that episode a listen as well. But if you think about Gen Z, going online, buying, we talked a little bit about AI mode and using AI to help make some of these purchasing decisions. I think that's a huge call out there, is if you have, reviews that are unaddressed or reviews calling out specific valleys within your customer experience, this content is going to be surfaced, whether it's through AI or, traditional search as well. But keep in mind, Gen Z is going to do their research. They want to know who you are as a business and what matters to you as well. So I think that's just a great call out there of, especially, as we make this AI mode transformation or, the open AI search as well. All of these reviews are going to help feed these engines, helping people make those buying decisions.
Well, it's such an important reminder to businesses to, when you mentioned valleys, Zach, and kind of avoiding those valleys, when you have peaks, make sure that you are asking for feedback at those peaks. If you know that in general, the start of your relationship with the customer goes really, really well, make sure that you're asking for that feedback at that point so you can get those positive reviews, feed that back into that research engine that people are going to do. Because you're spot on. This one, I was surprised it wasn't a higher percentage, to be honest. I can't remember the last time, and I'm not technically part of this Gen Z group, or I'm not part of this Gen Z group.
Not technically. I was
like way outside of it.
But like watching from the sidelines.
Yeah, exactly. I am not part of this Gen Z group, but I cannot remember the last time I purchased anything online where I did not do a fairly significant amount of research, at least quickly reading through reviews, even on, stupid things on Amazon or whatever, right? It's like, I'm going to read through those reviews and at least get an idea of what it is that I'm purchasing. So yes, totally agree with you, as it relates to making sure that your reviews are in line, that you're gathering those at important customer touch points so that all of this just feeds that virtuous cycle.
And the last statistic I want to share here kind of goes back to a conversation I had with a colleague here on the success team last week. It was Kristen, and I mentioned there was a pop up on a website that said like 20% off your next purchase, and I made a joke. I was like, "Well, now I have to buy it, right? 20, I can't pass that up.
I can't afford not to buy it,
right?" The last statistic here was 67% said that a discount or a promotion influenced their purchasing decision as well, and kind of tying into that. Gen Z is more likely to give you that zero party data. So if you think of like enter your email address for that 20% off, they're more likely to do that than some of these other generations as well. And Gabe, I feel like the zero party, discounting strategy here or promotional strategy is a little underutilized, especially in our space as well. But again, there it is. 67% said that would help influence their decision.
Yeah, it can be used as just a way to push people through to ultimately making that decision. And I agree with you. It's an opportunity to gather information about prospects, but then really incentivize them and give them a reason to purchase. If you're not giving them a specific reason, and it doesn't have to be a big discount. We're talking about a relatively small percentage here, especially in a recurring revenue business. If you're offering people a small percentage discount for a month or a couple of months just to get them excited and on board, then you've got that recurring revenue that's going to come from them for a long time.
And Gabe, let's kind of use that as a transition point to kind of what Gen Z is buying, why and how. Mm-hmm. But one of the big things, we've been talking about over the last 12 months or so is just the value of your products and services. And Gen Z does have a heightened awareness of value compared to some of these other demographics here. So in the broadband space, Gabe, I think of, how do we increase the perception of value for the products and services you sell? And we've talked about, the legacy 1 gigabit per second for, $100 a month. What's the value behind that?
Yep. Well, there isn't any unless you're somebody who probably works in this industry. And Zach, we were having this conversation just earlier today, and one of the things that we see on a lot of provider websites still is stuff like silver, gold, platinum. That's so generic as a way to explain your service tiers to a customer. And the younger generation, Gen Z specifically, is looking for to differentiate something that's differentiated. It's just very generic, for lack of a better term, to describe your services in that way. And it's a great opportunity to go back and look at that and think, what value am I actually delivering across all of these different services and products that I'm selling to my customers? Because that younger generation is going to be really looking for that value if they're going to purchase from you.
Gabe, we used much more colorful language when we were discussing the gold, platinum, silver.
That was about as nice as I could have said it.
I mean, the joke here though is, what is a silver tier? Unless you're like a mining company, and that's kind of one of the things I said, Gabe, is unless you're a mine, I don't know what a silver or gold tier is, especially when it comes to broadband. And I think this still is a little ubiquitous. I see it less and less, which is a good thing. But Gabe, I even mentioned I went to AI mode and I said, is this a good way to sell products and services? And of course, Google is like, well, there's no differentiation, there's no value, all these talking points we just had, but not to, sidetrack there. But again, when you're selling to Gen Z, silver, gold, platinum, where's the value in that? Again, this is a very value conscious demographic. that strategy is not going to work.
I made the joke that you might as well just call it service 1, 2, 3 at that point. I mean, is
ABC.
there really that much difference between, service A, B, C versus silver, gold, platinum? I honestly don't feel like there's that much difference. So not to go off on a tangent on that, but it was something that we were discussing today specifically just as it related to, Gen Z, what they're looking for, the value that they're looking to get out of a particular product or service. It's really important to have that clear differentiation.
So speaking of shopping, Gabe, I know you've been doing some shopping research as well. Tell me a little bit about what you're planning on buying.
Yeah, I feel like this is always, the random things that Gabe ends up purchasing every couple of months. So yeah, we're to kind of go back to the AI mode search. You mentioned it earlier, Zach. Again, I would highly recommend going back and listening to that episode that we did with Gina Schuler from Home Telecom last week. She did a great job of talking about how she's been doing research on her company using AI search mode to really understand how people are going to find her. But this also got me thinking about using ChatGPT to research and purchase products. And there were a couple of experiences that I had this week. So the first one was kind of a personal experience. I've been looking at the Aura rings, which are the, physical tracking, sleep tracking. I've been looking at it more for sleep tracking. I've been trying to use my Apple Watch more for sleep tracking, but frankly, it's the information is great. I just don't love wearing my watch all night because it's kind of uncomfortable. And I feel like, ironically, it's messing up my sleep. So I like the idea of having just something on my hand that is tracking my sleep. I'm getting a little older now, Zach. I need to be a little bit more thoughtful about sleep and, recovery and all those sorts of things. So, so I've been researching these rings, and I was using ChatGPT to do that. And one of the last things I did is I was going through and doing this research, obviously, trying to understand what people say positively and negatively. What do people say about the different finishes and which ones do they like and not like? And then I asked it to just give me direct links to purchase the product. And it spit out a nice little summary of like, here's where you can purchase it. There's different sizing things that you can do as well. I was really impressed with the shopping experience through ChatGPT, which is, I think, something that is still a little bit of a nascent use case. Certainly product research for sure is something that people have been doing, but the actual like shopping experience is really interesting. I wonder, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with ChatGPT and OpenAI specifically. Zach, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this, but like, do they start getting affiliate money for recommending specific products and services and that's a way that they start to monetize their solution?
I was just thinking, Gabe, I was like, man, I remember back in the day when ChatGPT didn't have like up-to-date internet access. Like, do you remember this? Like ChatGPT didn't
use not that long ago, man.
Yeah, it was like a year ago, maybe just over a year ago, but back in my day kind of thing. But no, that's pretty recent. So it's going to be interesting to see how tools like this, or even Google Gemini, how those influence buying products online.
Yes, how it influences purchase behavior. And one other thing I wanted to call out, and you and I were talking about this, so I just wanted to top it up. One of the really brilliant things, and I had this epiphany last night, one of the really brilliant things that ChatGPT has done is when you enter a question and it's thinking, there's a haptic response on your phone where it starts like buzzing a little bit when it's creating the response. And I was asking you if other AI tools do this. I find myself using ChatGPT most, so I don't use a lot of the other ones. But I think that's so smart from a branding perspective, because it's like a tactile thing that you actually have in response to the interactions that you're having with their product.
I love that. It does take me back, Gabe, to like the Xbox controller. And I don't know if you're a big gamer, but as you're gaming, you have that tactile feedback. And then if your controller starts to die, that's like the first thing that shuts off. And you're like, oh no, like what's going on here? That was the first thing I thought about, is because when I was testing another AI app, to see if it also had this haptic engine on the iPhone here, but it did not. And I was like, how do I know it's responding? So it was tough to like go to a different app, but it's such a, I don't want to say it's an odd, part of that experience of using the app, but
it's unique.
As Apple does these innovations, and of course, take advantage of it, but that's one of the ways ChatGPT is, I think you just said it right there, making that unique experience.
Well, and branding, it's something that now is sort of branded theirs, where, because they've done this, they've done it as long as I can remember, as long as I've been using it, it's kind of branded with their product. So anyway, a little bit of a diversion, but I just thought that was an interesting topic. So the last thing I'll say here is it relates to purchasing behavior and using AI search for purchasing behavior. I saw a really interesting post on LinkedIn where a guy was talking about a conversation he was having with his daughter, and he was talking to her about how she uses ChatGPT for purchasing. And she was saying that she asks the AI for specific links to products on like an Amazon or whatever, rather than going to Amazon directly and searching for that product. And I thought that was a really interesting use case as well, and something that we're going to see more people adopt, because frankly, the experience of going and searching, even in Google, or searching for a product on Amazon. I mean, how many times have you gone to Amazon and searched for a particular product, and like you just cannot find what you're looking for, even though you were very specific about the ask that you made? We've talked about this before too, Zach, but the UI there is frankly a bit of a debacle. So I think it's a great opportunity for businesses to think about, is there an easier way for me to get this information in front of my customers? And for those younger generations that are going to be using AI search to find those things, how can I make sure that I'm front and center?
Exactly, Gabe. And when it comes to the products and services you sell, going back to Gen Z, what are they buying? I want to talk a little bit about the consumer behavior there, because when we talk about what's driving some of these purchasing decisions, um, and ranking these in order, number one was quality, number two was if they had like an ongoing sale or a promotion, number three, the actual price itself, and again that kind of ties back to value. And then the next one, this is where I thought, things get really interesting here, is recommendations. Did a friend recommend this? Did a family recommend this? And I always think about those surveys of, how did you find us, kind of thing. That's going to be important as well. And I think that's where that AI recommendation is falling into this as well. Is AI going to recommend your products and services? Going back to the home telecom episode, was AI recommending home telecom? What were those valleys? Whether if there were any, what were the peaks as well? Again, calling all that out in that AI search. And then the last one here of purchase drivers was just, are you buying from a reputable brand? Is this a brand you can trust? Do they have values that align with your own as well?
Mm-hmm. And going back to the quality one, the first one, I'd be curious to hear your perspective on this, Zach, because again, I'm outside of this generation, but I think, not to totally to speak positively of Apple, I realize we kind of dumped on them a little bit at the beginning of this around the Apple Intelligence piece, but there is a quality aspect of Apple's hardware products. They are very high quality, and so people are much more willing to pay. Like Zach, I see you're wearing your AirPods. There are very cheap versions of those that you could go get for $25 or $30, but you
and
probably
they might last
paid
longer.
and they might last longer. Yes, but because there's this perception of quality with an Apple product, you're willing to pay $200, $250 for an Apple version of that product, because there is this perception of quality and the ease of interaction with the other types of devices that you're using from that company in particular. So I do think there's a generational aspect of this where, there are specific brands where people are willing to pay more for that perceived quality, even though, like to your point, it may not necessarily be actual quality, but there's just perceived quality there that people are willing to pay for.
Well, let's actually go back to this, Gabe. Let's talk about those same purchase drivers, but let's focus on Apple specifically. And for those listening, think of your own brand. Substitute Apple for your own brand. Do the same exercise. Apple's known for their quality. Sale, they don't do many promotions. I know when new iPhones come out, they'll do like a, trade in your iPhone and, get this much off. And then kind of tying into that trade-in promotion, the recycle promotion. Again, that goes back to the brand reputation. Apple's known for their sustainability efforts, so they're kind of ties in there. Mm-hmm. Price, Apple is known for being that premium price. Now, again, Gen Z is willing to pay for that price if there's value associated with it. And then, of course, recommendations, Gabe. Someday you'll be buying a phone for your kids, or they may be asking you, man. They may be buying their own phone and they may be asking you what you recommend. I have a feeling you're going to come out and recommend some form of the iPhone.
Agreed. 100%. I mean, I don't know that I've ever spoken to somebody who's used an iPhone and been like, oh man, what a crap product. Like, I don't think, I'm sure that person exists, but I don't know that I've spoken to them.
Gabe, we work with a lot of like very technical broadband people. We have someone listening right now who's got the Android phone, and we were just making fun of. But
they have the Android phone. They've probably never had an Apple device. They've just resisted against Apple and been like, no, I am standing up against whatever Apple believes in and the closed ecosystem. So I'm going to have an Android device. I think it's very rare for somebody to be on Android, go to Apple, and then go back to Android. Again, I'm sure that person exists out there, but I don't think they're very common.
I mean, and then going back to just I'm going to call it the ecosystem, but the AirPods. I've complained about AirPods countless times, but at the end of the day, it's a quality. I should say a quality product. It is a good product. Aside from them constantly breaking, the experience is great. Everyone recommends AirPods. I have the Bose earbuds. I forget what they're called, and the sound quality of those is so much better than Apple's AirPods. But the whole experience of AirPods, I'm on my Mac right now doing this podcast. If I got a phone call right now, I can pick up my phone call, automatically switch. Just the way it connects to everything within my life is fantastic. So again, now we're talking a little bit about the value there, but Apple aside, talked enough about Apple for the next 5 minutes. But I want to talk about coupons a little bit, because I am not a couponer. You will never see me cut one out. I'm not spending my Sundays, in the newspapers.
Is that still even a thing? Are there still coupons in newspapers? I genuinely have no idea.
I don't know. But like the reality too, though, is, I go to Walmart, I go to Safeway, occasionally, end up at McDonald's somehow. I'm always using the apps for each of these respective locations. And you better believe, like, I know all about McDonald's Free Fry Fridays coupon, or like the Safeway. One of my friends, I've seen the number, so this is not made up, has more than $9,000 in Safeway savings just from using like the Clip Deal app, or the Clip Deal button on the app. But again, Gen Z's big into this digital promotion, the loyalty apps, and all this does at the end of the day, Gabe, is number one, it builds brand loyalty, which is going to pay off in the future. I think that's a huge way to loop in Gen Z today. And again, going back to invest today, have this pay off in the future.
Yeah. Well, and I think about, you mentioned app, and I think there's a really interesting way that broadband service providers could start to take advantage of some of this and drive activity and interest in an app. Many broadband service providers have an app that they're providing to their customers to control the Wi-Fi, to do parental controls, to do network security, all of these sorts of things, right? We work with lots of customers who do that. Why would you not offer exclusive, maybe even exclusive products or the exclusive discounts, those sorts of things through the app? And if you can communicate with your customers directly through that app, even better, where you can set these specific promotions up for specific groups of people. It's a great opportunity to engage with your customers in a really exciting and meaningful way and drive their interest and loyalty to the app.
And Gabe, I think we finished off the conversation today talking about loyalty here. So again, going back to those things that Gen Z values, let's use a more broadband example now. Gabe, the big broadband players, the big ones, the big guys, would you say they're authentic or transparent? Because largely, I would say no. And this is something that Gen Z very much values. So for the broadband providers on the podcast today, having that authentic, transparent tone and voice with your brand is going to have a huge impact. Gen Z, of course, they embrace sustainability, social responsibility. Talked a little bit about that with Apple, but also that sense of community, that sense of belonging. And I think we see a lot of this with the co-ops we work with, Gabe, as well.
Well, and it goes back to a comment that we were making that was made earlier about buying from small businesses. Gen Z, that's something that Gen Z is really interested in doing. The larger national providers have to be a bit more generic in their messaging because they're marketing to millions of people that live in all across the US, across different states. So they have to be a bit more, generic, I guess, for lack of a better word. As the local provider, you're in a perfect position to do something that's different. And if Gen Z wants to buy from you already, there's a great opportunity to continue to lean in on that authenticity, being transparent, embracing all of these things that are important for them, and do it at a local level because you are the local provider who understands the communities that you serve.
And it's funny you mentioned that because as part of my broadband experience here, Gabe, I've sent you pictures of how much mail I get from a big broadband provider every week. It's insane. You know, they've been sending me all these pieces
Yeah.
for months on months, and not once have I been to their website. Not once have I called them. Not once have I shown any interest in their service. But I got a piece in the mail a while back, and it had the next town over. It had that town's name on mine. It's like, get the best internet in your town, you know, just got better kind of messaging. And I'm like, well, I don't even live there. Meanwhile, you know, my local provider, who I've largely had nothing but positive experiences with, does just that. They have that local, you know, highly targeted marketing. And that highly targeted marketing goes right into kind of the next two areas I want to talk about with Gen Z is two things they crave: personalization and experiences. And when we talk about personalization, Gabe, we've talked so much about this. We have episodes on personalization, but when you think about what life stage you are at, or what life stage your customers, your prospects are at, and being able to sell a solution or an offer that fits into that specific life stage, that's huge. Now, when you compare that to, again, the broadband example of just the, you know, the nationwide, here's 1 gig for, you know, $65 a month, huge difference there, and Gen Z knows it.
Well, and something you put in here around personalization is Gen Z expects personalization. That to me is the big difference between Gen Z, younger generations, and others. Is like, I'm happy when I get personalization. It's not necessarily something that I expect all of the time. You have grown up with that. You expect that people are going, the businesses that you work with, that you do business with, are going to have some level of information about you so that they're going to be able to personalize that experience. And you're disappointed when you don't get that.
Think of it this way, Gabe. And by Gabe, I mean everyone listening to the podcast. Gabe, this one might not resonate with you. Think of your Instagram feed, your TikTok feeds. That is highly personalized to you. I still think one of the biggest assets of TikTok is their algorithm that recommends content. It is always spot on. You know, Netflix as well. Think of that. It's content that I want to see, you know, and it's relevant. If we all had generic, you know, unpersonalized experiences, we'd be pretty frustrated. We may not, you know, have the loyalty to that app or to that product. So that's another, I think, example of, you know, what is personalization.
Yep. Yeah, it goes back to, I don't even remember when we had this conversation. It's been a while, but I remember there was this whole idea of Meta moving to you could choose whether you could have non-personalized ads where they wouldn't track any of your information, or have personalized ads. I'd frankly much rather have personalized ads, because I don't want my social media feeds just filled with crap that is completely irrelevant to me. And it's exactly spot on. It's not only the organic content from an algorithm perspective, but also the ad related content. And you know, the ads are the price that we pay for free social media, right? It's just the reality of the situation. And one of the announcements that was out this week as well, Zach, was that Meta was bringing ads into WhatsApp, and people are not happy about it. And I kind of go like, okay, fair. You don't have to be happy about it, but that's a free product that you get access to. You know, what did you expect was going to happen? You know, obviously these companies are going to look to monetize these solutions that they're putting out in the world, and the price that you pay is ads. And I personally would much rather have personalized ads in the tools that I'm using versus, again, just a bunch of generic crap thrown out the wall.
Gabe, I've been shopping for the last, like, I swear, 6 months of my life, not to be dramatic, for new bedding. And, you know, this is just a painful thing to shop for. I have no idea what I'm doing. But I get a lot of ads now on this specific topic. This is what I want to see. It's going to help me not only educate, but make that final purchasing decision. So again, that personalized experience is compared to, I don't know what other ads I could possibly be seeing, but it fits right into that specific life stage, you know, that specific, you know, mindset that I'm in. But along with personalization, I mentioned experiences, AI, VR. I love going to websites and it has like the 3D button. Lowe's and Home Depot do this a lot too, Gabe. But you can like see, Apple does it as well. You can like see a product With Apple, you can like place it on your desk and like walk around or like I love that immersive experience. But when I talk about experiences too, I also think of, I mentioned like the 1 gigabit per second Wi-Fi, right? Okay, well, what can you do with that? Well, maybe you can enable a gaming experience. So instead of talking about 1 gigabit per second, let's talk about gaming experiences. Let's talk about what you can do. And again, now we're building on that value. And Gabe, we've talked about value-based offers. Same thing here, building on that experience and highlighting that for Gen Z.
Yep, absolutely. I have to say, I don't think I've ever done the like virtual thing in a room. So I feel like we finally found something where I'm just completely different than you.
You've got to do it. Or even like the Home Depot app, I think it is, Lowe's as well, I mentioned. You can like put like paint on your walls or like different flooring options.
It's pretty
My
cool.
goodness, like whoever thought of that? It's just a great use case. You take a picture, start swapping out, remodel your home. It's fantastic. And along with making things personal, make it easy. Gabe, I mentioned at the beginning of the episode of like how Gen Z, we want things done yesterday, right? And I always say that I want things done yesterday. But we've kind of grown up in this time of instant gratification. Yeah, you and I have geeked out a lot about like the one click checkout or like the buy with Apple Pay. We're like, you don't type in any data, it knows your shipping address, it knows your payment info. You click the Apple Pay button, it does the Face ID or the Touch ID scan, and you're done, right?
Yeah.
The same day experiences, and I think the big one for our industry here, Gabe, is self installs, being able to allow not only Gen Z, but your broader customer base the option of, plugging in their own equipment or the white glove self-install as well, that guided install. I think there is a lot of value in that. And again, if this is something that your competition starts to offer, you're going to have people that says like, oh, with BSPA, I have to wait for them to either come on site or mail me the equipment, and then have someone come activate it, going through that now. Or, like I said, you can either pick up the equipment, mail it to you, do it yourself on your own time frame. Lots of value in that instant gratification.
100%. I talk to a lot of providers when I ask how long their install windows are. I often hear weeks, and that is not a good situation for Gen Z, especially. And could not agree with you more. John DeRocher just put out a great post on LinkedIn today. Who's our chief customer officer? He was talking about white glove and what that means. And this is a conversation that comes up a lot with our customers. And oftentimes people want to be seen as that premium provider. We're white glove. We're going to be able to, we're going to come to your house and we're going to do an amazing install. And that's really important. However, it's also really important to meet people where they are and meet people where how they want to do things. And their perception of white glove may be, I just communicate with you in a very specific way and in a very white glove way throughout that self-install process to make it easy for you to do it on your own and make it much faster. So I think it's a great point, Zach, about especially on that self-install piece and how providers should be thinking about this younger generation that is coming up. Again, they want that instant gratification. They do not want to wait 2 weeks for an install. If they're waiting 2, 3, 4 weeks, they're just going to go find another provider because being without the internet, to the point earlier about 98% using internet regularly, do you think they're going to be without it because you can't get out there to install it for a couple of weeks? Zero chance.
This goes back to a story, and I'm sure I've shared this with you as well. But during the pandemic here, my cable modem died, and I called up. I'm like, hey, modem won't come on. There's no lights. What do I do? Knowing they were going to have to send me a new one. Well, they needed to schedule like an install and somebody to come on site, and they were more than a month out. So the first thing I did was Google alternatives, and sure enough, there was a fixed wireless provider, cellular provider, different technology now, who said, hey, we can have this to you in 2 days. Gabe, you can imagine what I did, right?
Yep. Even though it was a lesser experience, obviously
Exactly.
that experience was probably not as good as what you would have had with waiting for the modem to come, having that, hardwire connection experience, but you needed connectivity, or, you had the perception that you needed connectivity.
The thing
you could have just read a book or something, man. Like, come on.
I don't know if that was allowed, but the thing I want to call out here too is when I made that decision, being in the industry, I knew what I was getting myself into. I knew, what could go wrong or what the benefits are. Your average consumer is not going to know that. We talk about 5G home internet. How's that different than 5 Gbps home internet kind of thing, right? Like these kind of, conversations that we are so, in tune within the industry, our customers or prospects don't have that level of expertise and, maybe making the wrong buying decision. So that, again, great opportunity there to optimize that customer experience. And again, have that instant gratification for your, not only your Gen Z, but there may be other, customers, prospects, different demographics that are interested in this as well.
We talked about this with Bridget a little bit when we did the episode with her a few weeks ago, and Bridget and I are definitely not in the Gen Z, the Gen Z generation, but we still want to be able to do things ourselves because we have busy lives and we don't want to have to sit around and wait for somebody to come over and do stuff for us. We want to be able to just deal with it on our own.
48-hour install window, Gabe.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Oh, brutal.
But hey, Gabe, like always, great episode. We talked about last week's with Home Telecom and Gina a little bit as well. So go give that a listen if you have not done so yet. But thank you everyone for tuning in to Buffery. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to follow us on your favorite podcast app and to share it with your friends and colleagues. And for more insights and updates, be sure to connect with Gabe and I on LinkedIn.